Okay, you are live.
I believe you're muted.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 15th Housing and Community Development Committee meeting. I'm your chair, Sage Turner, and I'd like to welcome you. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there today with us, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering a code 9791. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, you would use the same number, 855-925-2801. The meeting code is 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, callers will hear, for more options, please press star. Pressing *3 will allow callers to listen and continue to listen live and join the speaker queue. We will have 3 minutes. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and callers should only join the speaker queue during the time in the agenda they wish to speak. I'm going to go through roll call and introduce some city staff as well. Vice Mayor Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Kathy Ball.
Good morning.
Interim Community and Economic Development Director, Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Community Development Program Director, Paul D'Angelo.
Good morning.
And I think I got everyone that I can see. All right, so we're going to get started on our agenda. Up first is the approval of the minutes. Any questions, comments? If none, may I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
A second.
Great, thank you. We'll do a roll call. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
And myself. All right, the minutes have been approved. We'll move quickly on to item number 2, the community development and homeless updates. I believe we have Paul to speak with us about this, or is here to answer any questions we might have.
Yeah, good morning, Councilwoman Turner. If I may get a couple minutes just to point out a few things on the community development updates for you all to take a quick look at, that would be great. Right now, just wanted to point out the updated Housing Trust Fund balance. That link shows that we have, with some funds that have come back to us, as well as also some loans being paid off, we have about $2.35 million available for Housing Trust Fund loans. We have a few things potentially in the pipeline, but just wanted to give a shout out there to our development friends that there is some money available in our Housing Trust Fund. I also wanted to point out that we have our affordable rents for 2021 under the other section. So we've got Appendix 1, which breaks down the affordable rents when you utilize one of our city tools based on the HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, AMIs, the area median incomes, and we have that calculated, as well as a homeownership expense calculator that we now call Appendix 2, so that folks can take a look at what it takes to get into a home at various prices and at various levels of area median income. I also wanted to talk about the fee rebate policy, which I'll come back to at the end. I did want to point out the monitoring, which is something that hadn't been done in a while. We are monitoring our subrecipient partners. So we just monitored 5 of our home partners just to see how they were handling the home funds and subrecipients and their grant funding. So far, so good on that. We'll have more to report. We'll be doing the CDBG monitoring here shortly, hopefully in the beginning of August. Kayla has started their orientations, which is really excited for the Kayla program. Alex couldn't join us this morning. And almost done, the last but not least, are getting there. The partnership with UNC Chapel Hill, they're getting close to telling our 5-year investment story into the community. I'm meeting with them in person on June 23rd to take a look at all those materials. So really excited about that. And as always, resources at the bottom and more ways for folks to get involved. With that, I'm happy to take any questions on a few things I wanted to point out. And then I do need some direction on fee rebates. Thanks for listening.
Any questions or comments for Paul? I have a couple. First of all, thank you. I mean, if you're listening at home or if you are able to get on the website and find this document, there's a wealth of information, and it's an ongoing, updated document about everything in the pipeline, everything we're building, everything we're partnering on. It's an amazing amount of work that goes into this. So thank you to staff that continue to work on it and produce it every month. I was thankful to see the new AMIs on there. And just to restate what Paula said, the new AMIs are out. We're publishing them today. And it was also thankful to see the link to the new story map on urban renewal land. So great information in there. The spreadsheet for the home ownership expense calculator is a phenomenal tool. If anybody out there is just kind of wanting to poke around at the market and figure out what they can do and what it might look like, it's a wonderful resource. Questions. I reached out to Margie Bukowski this morning. I haven't heard back yet. Just trying to hone in on their timeline on Lee Walker Heights. Does anyone have an update? We had thought they might be done by now, and I know everything takes longer, but do we know if they'll finish this year?
I believe so. And as part of the grant agreement with David Nash and the Housing Authority, we have granted their final last draw request of that $4.2 million investment from the city as they met all those milestones. The last milestone is that they are to kind of come up with a report for us. And I spoke with David actually yesterday that in July or August HCD, I think he's going to bring kind of a final wrap-up report to this committee. If that works for you all, it's the final deliverable from that grant agreement. And I believe he should be done in July or August.
Great. And Margie texted me just now to say she'll be done by the end of July. So that's great. Thanks for tuning in, Margie. Exciting. And I think the wrap-up report is a wonderful idea. You know, we leapt pretty big when we went after 3 high impact sites and redoing all of these public housing communities and so on. I think it's important that we circle back and close the circle and see how it went. Other thing I was going to ask, and this is kind of unrelated, but could be, I know I took a survey recently from the Dogwood Health Trust around a Bowen housing assessment. Are we participating at all in that?
So the Bowen folks reached out and then there was some information shared so people could submit their opinions as stakeholders in the community. But regarding Asheville and Buncombe County, our information was so up to date that they didn't need to do anything else at this point. So that's an 18 county region. The information that we worked, I think, was published in April of 2020. So they felt that that was plenty new enough with all of the COVID related things. So they're incorporating all of that data into that larger 18 county needs assessment.
Wow, 18 counties. That'll be very enlightening.
I believe. I think so.
Okay. That's all for my questions or comments. Anything else before we move on?
Just the fee rebates. I wanted to just briefly discuss, as you all may remember, in 2019, we separated out the land use incentive grant from fee rebates so that it was more clear on how we could work together or work separately to move different projects forward and different goals with fee rebates or a property tax grant. With the land use incentive grant, we have that obviously continuing to come back to council. With fee rebates, we had never thought about this, but we left that language in that we would bring fee rebates back to committee and council each time fee rebates came through for individual affordable units with a 50, 75, or 100% break on some of those fees. Working with Ben Woody in development services, we feel we can do that at a staff level for this, and there are smaller amounts that we can not only make those decisions at a staff level, but also the compliance. So we were looking for a head nod to bring a fee rebate update to council, just removing the fee rebates need to be approved by council and that they can be done at a staff level.
Committee members, any comments or feedback?
So staff level approval, but you would just report to us on how often? Just an annual report?
So hopefully, Councilwoman Smith, the pipeline that is attached in the CD updates will have a separate section for fee rebates, so you could see what's moving through that way.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
And these are the smaller amounts as well, just on the affordable units.
Councilwoman Mosley, any thoughts?
I'm debating internally.
Okay.
What's the what's the difference as far as time or work that has to be done for it to come to council?
I think what we looked at when working with Ben Woody, that it could be like a 3-month delay working through committee and council, up to a 3-month delay to actually get them the rebate and the grant back. So because it's a smaller amount, we can do that internally. And once they submit that, we could turn it around in a week. And a lot of our nonprofit development partners in particular, that money is really helpful to their balance sheets. So we just thought it made more sense than bringing each fee rebate to council for approval, to committee and council for approval.
Okay, thank you.
I'm fine with this. I think the ongoing document that will let us review what has happened sounds wonderful. Maybe we can treat it like we do other things like Luigi and HTF, where once a year or something we review and just make sure it's on an agenda to say, hey, is this still working for us?
Absolutely. That commitment on the policy updates is still there. And I think there were even some folks internally that thought that this was already kind of like in the works to be done at a staff level, but we just wanted the clarity. And I appreciate the direction from legal and city management to help out with this.
Okay, well, it sounds like you got direction from us too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes item 2 on our agenda, the community development updates. Once again, if you're just tuning in, you can find that document online and there's a ton of information in there. Moving on to item number 3, update on 319 Biltmore, and Nikki Reed will be kicking us off.
Good morning. I also want to share that both Paul D'Angelo and Stephanie Monsendahl are members of our team that are here today and are available for any questions. Jenna, if you would go ahead and bring up the slides. What we'd like to do is just share kind of an update on how we have come to where we are today and just talk about next steps moving forward. Okay, so as Jenna loads those slides. Great, thanks Jenna, appreciate that. So yeah, early on, we've had, additionally, Sasha Vertinsky was also part of our team where we had, Paul really focusing on the financials. My focus was really the real estate, and Steffi and Sasha both with the planning lens as well as the community engagement lens. So next slide, Jenna. So really what we hope to share today is that our path has been informed by due diligence and the community input that occurred early on to determine that 319 is an excellent opportunity for mixed use, mixed income, and affordable housing development. Thereafter, we went through a city council process to adopt a policy to define the process and the parameters for affordable housing on city property. So we'll go over that process. And then last, we'll talk about the RFP process that ultimately resulted in Homes Urban being named as the finalist for development, and then how their proposal is scheduled to come before council at a later date for a final decision. So next slide, Jenna. So the high impact sites. So that terminology really came about because we wanted to look at properties that could really fulfill a high impact in terms of number of affordable units and impact on community. Next slide, Jenna. So really this dates back to the initial passage of the bond referendum. So in 2016, $25 million was devoted towards affordable housing with $15 million to the redevelopment of city-owned land. At that time, we also entered into an MOU with Duke Energy to get the property at 319 under contract. And then we identified these 3 key sites in a city council bond work session that said these were sites that had the greatest potential. So South Charlotte Street, these are the city-owned properties south of Beaumont, 319 and 91 Riverside. So from that point, we really began the process of doing due diligence to determine what opportunities existed at the sites, as well as the financial analysis there as well. So next slide, Jenna. So we went through this process of doing neighborhood and site tours, reaching out to stakeholders, doing a lot of market research to determine what kind of units, what number of bedrooms, things like that would be appropriate for the sites, as well as site analysis, so geotechnical and environmental review. And then we went through a series of preliminary design where we were looking at modeling on the sites to really see exactly what kind of builds were possible on the sites, how many units could be accomplished, what would it really mean to be high impact with the numbers of units, and then what was the cost as a result of that. what was the cost of the total developments, as well as what we could see in terms of city costs for subsidy. So again, that was a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of math to really determine what that subsidy would look like, and a lot of presentations to both the AHAC, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, as well as HCD throughout that process. And then ultimately, we wanted to culminate in a process for implementation on how we actually achieve the affordable housing and the mixed income communities on these sites. Next slide, Jenna. So this is an outtake from one of those presentations where we looked at the Biltmore site, and our modeling showed potentially 300 units. The mixed income element could include over 12,000 square feet of commercial space. Really key component was that connected to Lee Walker Heights, as well as that mixed-use development that would front along Biltmore, and a lot of other elements that we thought about during that first era of the planning process. Next slide. And here you can see we did some modeling. What you can see in the yellow is really the bulk of the residential opportunity there. And you see how it kind of connects to Lee Walker as well. You see in red there is the idea of where the commercial could be located. And then in gray is actually the parking structure, because with this type of development in this location, it was also key that a parking structure would be necessary to build this kind of density. Next slide. Then we got into the numbers where we looked at, okay, of a total development cost of $49 million, what would it really take to accomplish the affordable objectives? I know Paul's moniker is always, you got to either subsidize on the front end or subsidize on the back end to really achieve that affordability. So in this particular case, we were looking at what would our incentive costs be on the front end for different types of affordability mixes. And of course, it makes perfect sense that the more deeply affordable units, the more numbers of affordable units you have, the more you have to invest on the front end. So we ran several different scenarios of looking at how many units of that 300 odd units that we were looking to build there, what would it cost to achieve different levels of affordability? What would that subsidy look like from the city? And getting our heads wrapped around those numbers so that we thought about policies for building on that site, that we would understand the cost associated with those policies around affordability. So looking at anywhere from a $10 million incentive to really see 60% of those units be built affordably, to a deeper affordability where 100% of the units being affordable would necessitate something like a $20 million or a $19 million incentive. So really grappling with how those numbers played out in those build costs. Next slide, Jenna. So when we came to the end of that process, what we identified, looking at all three sites, is that 319 Biltmore was really ready to go. It was appropriate for the use. It had a great opportunity to build affordable and mixed income housing. It was pretty much vacant. There was an old building on the site, but nonetheless, it was ready to go. With Charlotte Street, we really needed to understand the costs of the operations and maintenance to relocate the existing city facilities on the site. That work is underway, and I believe it's close to prime time. I thought it was going to come about during the budget process, so we can certainly provide that update. But that work began too as a result of this process. And the last piece with Riverside, there was a time when we were considering a partnership with ArtSpace. So that one's been quiet for a while, but I think we all know that the River Arts District has really seen its those improvements be installed, really has a future. So I'm excited about when we can get back to looking at those properties in Riverside Drive. Next slide, Jenna. So here we go. We kind of had concluded our due diligence on looking at numbers of units, potential subsidies, as well as how each of our high impact sites would have a path forward. So the next thing that we wanted to do is to develop an informed policy on how we would go about seeking affordable housing on these city-owned land sites. Next slide, Jenna. So this was really too the culmination of a city council work session that was held in September of 2019, when we really sat down and went through the deep details on how all these pieces fit together, how things play out in the market, and how we have to acknowledge how our incentives factor into those things. And so with that, we came away with these criteria, this baseline. In developing this too, we also wanted to approach an equity lens and really understand what that meant. And so when we looked at incomes, when we looked at our usage of housing choice vouchers in our community, what we wanted to say with city-owned property is that that was a requirement, accepting housing choice vouchers. But also aware of how subsidies factor in, we looked at this minimum of 20% of all units at 60% area median income being what met that test of subsidy and also what was existing in the marketplace. The other thing was that affordability period of looking at how a 20-year period was our baseline, but we really hope to see a longer affordability period and would really try to incentivize that or encourage submittals to reach that longer level of affordability. That's also where you see that last bullet too, is that this was the baseline, but really where appropriate, we wanted to see where we could exceed the baseline or offer other community benefits. Next slide. We also outlined with that policy that we would administer an RFP or RFQ process unless otherwise directed by city council or city manager. That would be our process unless there was another case that would dictate otherwise. We also acknowledge that the affordable housing financial incentive could be the use of the land. So what that meant is that we could sell the city land at a price less than fair market value to ensure that those affordable housing goals were met, that we could use that land as a subsidy. We also had the caveat, though, that we needed to see how that would work in the pro forma so that we had full transparency with how the value of the city's subsidies would be utilized in a development. And then if we were able to achieve a sales price on the affordable housing, that it would go back into our affordable housing program. So all funds received from the sale of land that is used for affordable housing would go back. This happened at the 360 Hilliard site, where the funds that were generated from the sale of that land were then designated for Housing Trust Fund and other affordable housing uses. Next slide. So that policy was passed in, I think it was September, again, at the end of the work session, September 2019 was really when that policy was approved by council. So really that then positioned staff to be able to issue the RFP for 319. Next slide. And so that happened in February 5th, 2020, right before the pandemic. We had worked on really putting together our best foot forward with this request for developer proposals. We basically included all of the work of the initial due diligence, the community engagement, the site studies, the incentive, financial analysis. All of that work was included to really allow developers to see the entire level playing field of what they were looking at and really come forward with their best proposals. And that happened. We were very fortunate to have 9 proposals that were received. We felt that was a real strong showing. Ultimately had 2 rounds of virtual interviews that were held with the top candidates. And then in the fall of 2020, Homes Urban was selected as a finalist to develop the site. Next slide, Jenna. What they had proposed is a mixed-use, mixed-income development of 250 studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and about 19,000 square feet of commercial space. Of those 250, they were offering 50 affordable units at the 60% area median income. 25 units would be at 80%. Their affordability period was suggested at 30 years. That was in their proposal. They would agree to accept the housing choice vouchers. Their community development model really was based on health and wellness and having on-site services with a partnership with MAHEC to really positively address social determinants of health. They were also looking to incorporate MWBE goals in their build and construction of the development. And there you see their partners were with McMillan Pezin Smith Architecture as well as MAHEC. Their incentive to really pull this off was really the city land contribution. And that was one of the strongest points of their proposal, was the fact that with everything we had learned about the affordability and the costs associated with affordability, that the city land contribution was one of the strongest attributes of their proposal, was how that incentive played out at what seemed to be a really good deal for the city, is to have the land being the incentive and otherwise seeing this really great product to come from Homes Urban. Next slide. So here we are, we kind of find ourselves here today in the fall. The city entered into a non-binding letter of intent with Homes Urban based on their submitted proposal that really allowed them to begin work on the design of the project. And then once we have a strong handle on the final components of that design, then it would come forward for a city council process to review the project details and the real estate terms, and then to vote on a final development agreement with Homes Urban. This is very much following a similar process that we did for the 360 Hilliard site. So with that, that's really the conclusion of what I wanted to share. I think at this point, as a reminder, these are kind of our key takeaways of the process. And so with that, I'm here for any questions, as well as Paul and Stephanie, and looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Great job. That's a lot of information in this presentation. And, for those of you listening at home, we had requested an update on this parcel for the last couple meetings. So I appreciate y'all prioritizing it and getting it in front of us. Fellow committee members, questions, comments?
Thank you for this. This looks really good. I was very happy to see the community engagement portion. I'm still kind of hesitant because of this property's location, because of the neighborhoods, because of its proximity to other land acquired through urban renewal. You recall that we passed the initial seed money for the reparations fund. And since then, I've gotten a lot of calls. People are really excited about it. People are still holding on, however, to the 2 parcels of land that were not considered or not put into the urban renewal moratorium. They were excited that a portion of the sale proceeds went to seed the fund, but apparently that's still not enough. And what has complicated the matter further is there's now quite a bit of discussion concerning the McCormick or the Memorial Stadium field and how, long story short, folks in the community, the Black community especially, feel that even that field is being gentrified. So I'm going to further my request that we move 319 into the urban renewal moratorium. So I'm going to formally make a motion to halt all work on 319 Biltmore Avenue site and move that land into the urban renewal land moratorium.
I'll second that motion.
All right, as chair, I got to have like a point of order here. I mean, normally, if something this large was going to be discussed, we would put it on an agenda as an agenda item. We'd have public input. There would be staff reporting. I mean, that's a pretty big motion, y'all, and you've got a second, so it can pass.
A point of order that is actually in order. So once the second has been heard, Robert's rules recalls a vote on the motion.
Well, discussion first, and I can appreciate that, and I will vote. Assuming once I discuss a couple things. So I'm concerned, but I'm concerned about process mostly, and I think process-wise, regardless of what happens today, this would still go to council. So I guess we can have a motion, we can have a approved motion, but we would still, I think, carry this to council. And maybe I thought I saw Janice briefly, but
I'm here.
Yeah. I mean, can you speak to a little bit about process? As a chair here, I'm thinking we were supposed to maybe have put something like this on the agenda and had some input, but I mean, are we just okay with motions on the fly like that? And
you can do motions, and as Ms. Mosley has said, and you're correct also in saying discussion. It will go to council. because obviously these approvals, that previous approvals were all granted by council approval. So this will be sort of turning direction and previous council approval. So it will certainly go to council and would have the opportunity for discussion. If you could try to amend a motion to just have one more time at HCD before it moves forward, but that's up to you all.
Are either of you interested in that amendment?
Not at this time. I will request that you call the vote.
Okay, I just have one more clarifying thing. Councilwoman Mosley, could you just help me understand a little bit? So the proximity of this land to other urban renewal land, this wasn't urban renewal land, but the proximity to it. And then, go ahead.
Excuse me. It's a couple of reasons. So last year when we decided to place land acquired through urban renewal into a moratorium, there were two parcels that were purposely excluded. That one was the one, White Labs on Charlotte Street. The other was Ashland. So in an effort to make us whole, the proposal is to instead move 319 into the urban renewal moratorium. This land is particularly appropriate given its location. It's located in areas or near areas that were historically African American communities. And the notion that it is a high impact site makes it even more appropriate. The Walker Heights is there, White Fawn Drive, Buchanan, Southside, Ashland Avenue, East End, what used to be Mountain Street. That whole area was an African American community. The fear is that at this time, with the development that is presented, it will do no more than to further gentrify the area. And with what is going on right now at Memorial Field, the discussion, community members also see that as another way of gentrifying a historically African American community. So we took two pieces out. Let's put this one in to make up for what we took out.
Thank you for that additional explanation. It helps me to understand where you're coming from. Okay, so I'm going to do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
Myself, nay. I appreciate the discussion and extra information. And so from this point, I think it won't come back to HCD. It will move on to council unless there's some request otherwise, but I'm not hearing that. Okay, so let me get back to the agenda. We have finished item 3. I cannot get back to my agenda. Sorry. Here we go. Oh, there it goes. Sorry for the delay. I had a little bit of an update on my browser. Item number 4 is an update and a presentation on the sale of 2 city lots to the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust. And we have Nikki and Paul with us and Anna and a few folks. Who would like to lead this presentation?
I'll kick us off again.
Okay, thank you, Nikki.
Sure thing. And yes, I'm joined by Anna Zubskaya, who's the Executive Director of ABCLT. And so thanks, Jenna. Yes, if you could go ahead and start that slideshow. So a little bit of how this relates back to 319. So as you can see, we provided a lot of policy infrastructure through council's hard work to really allow us to start to move forward on some of these initiatives. So with that policy passed, we started looking at other opportunities for how we could encourage affordable housing on city-owned land. So this aspect that we're getting ready to present today is a different approach, right? But we're really excited to share this with you. So next slide, Jenna. So what we want to talk about is the background on these 2 properties, the Lufty Ave and the Chestnut Street lot, and talk about the request for proposals process that we did for those 2 sites. Then I'll turn it over to Anna with the ABCLT and talk about their proposal for the 2 properties. We'll talk about the real estate terms, and we are ready to ask for action today by the committee to then forward this on to City Council with the committee's recommendations. So we'll be hopefully discussing that at the end. So next slide, Jenna. So this approach really focused in on some of the single family lots that the city owned. So this parcel here was identified in the city's portfolio. The city had acquired it in 1929. So years ago, I believe, as a result of a tax foreclosure that had happened. But really nothing had occurred on the site since then. And it's ideally located in West Asheville. The site is really appropriate for some type of single family development. So in our view, with no other competing city use for a park or anything like that, it seemed to be ideal for a potential single family style affordable housing development. Next slide, Jenna. The other site that we looked at is situated at the corner of Young and West Chestnut Street. The city actually acquired this in 1984 when it was expanding the bridge there. So it was a leftover parcel from that bridge work. Again, the size of the site is something that could be suitable for affordable housing, single family development. So next slide, Jenna. So we then, in accordance with our policy that was passed, this past September 9th, we issued the request for proposals, and that was open to developers. We held a webinar for interested parties. Those proposals were submitted by October 14th. Staff reviewed proposals in December and January, and then ultimately selected the ABCLT as the finalist for the Lufty and Chestnut lots. And that was back in January. So here we are today to present on accepting their proposal. We also had another proposal on this, that Compact Cottages was the other entity that submitted a proposal. I will pause to say that we had another site that we had included in this single family opportunity. But with all things, the research that's involved, that other site had some issues with deed restrictions. That sounds familiar, right? So we weren't able to move forward on that other site, given those deed restrictions, but nonetheless, we feel really positive and have cleared all the initial hurdles as it results with the Lufty and Chestnut site. So we are prepared to move forward and hopefully bring this all the way to a closing. So next slide. So now I will turn it over to Anna and let her talk about the ABCLT's work and their proposal for these two sites.
Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, everyone. Anna Zieska here with the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to present this to you, and thank you for reviewing our proposal, hoping to receive ownership of these city-owned lots. So first, I want to talk really briefly about the benefits of a CLT for any of you who may be not as familiar with the model or new to it. So next slide. So three main benefits are affordability, community, and economic stability. And affordability, I don't think I really need to go into too much detail with this group. You all understand the market. You all understand the difficulties of purchasing a home in this area right now. So the median home sales price in Buncombe County is over $300,000. That $315,000 is actually about a year old from the Bowen report. So it's actually higher than that now, but I just wanted to put that number in there to give some perspective. Our homes will typically cost the buyer anywhere between $110,000 and $225,000. So you can see how big of a difference that is between the market price and what we're able to offer to our buyers. So on average, we're investing about $70,000 per home to decrease the price to the buyer. Next slide, please. The second benefit is community. We're, of course, a community land trust, and that's what makes us unique and different. We are creating community ownership. We are creating a new model for ownership. We are rooted in the community where we have members of the organization who have certain voting rights and get to have a say in the things that we're doing. We also have a board that's comprised of community members who represent those that we are working to serve. And this is really, again, a new model to create community wealth building. So it is different from the individual land ownership model, but it is the benefit to the entire community to preserve permanent affordability. Next slide. And finally, economic stability. Of course, consistent mortgage payments for our homeowners, and then an opportunity to build wealth. So even though this is a shared equity model and there's not as much of an individual wealth building opportunity as other options, we still do provide wealth building to our buyers. So I'll go into this 2.25% here in a second with the next two slides and talking about the ground lease. So you can move forward, please. And one more, thank you. So the ground lease is the agreement that we have between the ABCLT and our homeowners. This is signed and recorded at time of closing. It is the element that connects the individual ownership or the household and ownership of the structure itself to the organizational ownership of the land. And as I mentioned just a second ago, what we have in that ground lease is that resale formula. So that 2.25% is the equity that our buyers accumulate annually, and that's compounded annually. And we use that 2.25% if the buyer, 3, 5, 10 years from now decides to sell the home. We calculate that 2.25% that goes back to the buyer at time of sale, but we also use that to calculate the sales price to the next buyer. So you can go to the next slide that shows this a little bit more. So the resale price would be the initial purchase price. So let's say we sold the house initially for $150,000, and then we add on the 2.25% that buyer will receive upon selling the home. So if they've been there for 5 years, they receive that 2.25% over 5 years, added on to the initial $150,000 that they paid, and that's the price that the next buyer would pay. And so those are the restrictions that keep it affordable for the next buyer and the next buyer and the next buyer, and for generations to come. Just want to highlight a couple of other things about our ground lease. So we do require that the homeowner occupies the home for the entire year. We have exceptions to that, of course, if necessary, but we do want it to be their primary residence. We do want the owner to be living there. And the fees that are associated with our model is essentially $100 land fee. So lease fee. So $50 of that is the land fee that stays with us as the organization for administrative purposes. And then $50 out of that 100 actually goes into a repair fund that the homeowner can use at a later time. So every month they're accumulating those $50. And then let's say, 3 years from now, they need to replace their water heater. They can go into that fund and get funds to be able to replace that water heater or whatever other maintenance they may need on their home. And finally, I just want to mention that we do also have a capital improvement credit provision in our ground lease. And what that means is that if the buyer added on square footage, let's say an extra bedroom or a bathroom, then we also have a formula to calculate a percentage of the investment that they made into that improvement that they get back upon the sale of the home. So next slide, I just want to wrap up talking about our goals for these city-owned lots. So next slide, please. As Nikki mentioned, Chestnut Street and Lufty Avenue. So please keep in mind that we submitted this proposal about 9 months ago. So we do know that numbers have changed, prices have gone up, and we'll look to recalculate prices as needed as we get closer to building. But at the time of submitting the proposal, we were looking to build approximately 1,400 square foot house on each of these lots. And we were looking to sell them for $135 each, and that would mean that it would be affordable at 60% AMI. We are working with the Juna Group, and we hope to complete both of these projects within 12 months from the closing on both of these properties. And just put our vision here. Part of our vision is equitable and diverse communities, and we're really excited about this opportunity to provide homeownership opportunities in these two different neighborhoods, and have them be at serving those lower incomes at 60% AMI, and possibly even lower if we can get to that. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll stick around, but just wanted to give you all that overview. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. This is very exciting. Any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, then I would like to just express my appreciations for you taking the time for all of this hard work in general, but for also creating this presentation for us and updating us. We do have an action item on this. We will need to vote. We didn't have any public comment, so I think we can just move to a vote. Let me see if I have a suggested motion.
I move that the Asheville City Council, do you have it?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Shamika. You go ahead and I'll second.
Okay, we authorize the city manager to donate 2 city-owned lots, Lufty Avenue and West Chestnut Street lots, to the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust for $1, subject to affordable housing deed restrictions.
Second.
Wonderful. Any other discussion? Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mosley.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Wonderful. Okay. Congratulations to the ABCLT. It's wonderful to see y'all progressing. I'm excited. All right. That concludes item number 4 on our agenda. Item number 5 is held for public comment. I heard, and perhaps Jenna can confirm, that we did not actually have any public comment at that time, emailed or called in. Is that correct?
Correct. And there's no one in the queue right now.
There is one in the queue. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry, there's no one in the queue.
Got it. All right. Well, then I believe we are all set here. There's some future HCD items on there for y'all to review. Get in touch if you need anything added to that list. And I appreciate your time this morning, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. We are adjourned.